Hello and welcome to this episode of Mordred's Community Multiplayer EU4 Political Chat. I'm your host Torsion, joined by our co-host Martian. Martian, how's it going?
Going good. Thanks for having me again.
So, we'll open it up. Some movers and shakers on the Great Power list. Um, a new tag, Deccan in India. We'll touch base on that a little bit. Great Britain, 4,000 dev. Ruthenia, 3,000 dev. Any surprises with the gap that Great Britain's starting to open up on the rest of the pack? Or any interesting countries on or off the list from your perspective?
I think it's interesting. I mean, the Great Britain running ahead, it's not surprising. I mean, I think we saw that coming as soon as you had them get to America. You knew that was going to happen. I think it is interesting to see, though, how the dev difference in the middle of the pack with France, Japan, and Hungary is starting to close in and get a lot tighter. And all of them are increasing their dev very quickly, but staying right with each other.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, North America, New Ortonberg in particular, um, let's see, yeah, over 1,000 dev now. So accounts for quite a bit of that from a Great Britain perspective. Um, the one surprise I will mention, Portugal, still not on the list, just barely below. Uh, we'll see what happens in coming weeks, but I have a feeling Portugal may be on this list next week. If you had to pick a country to join the list, who do you think it would be?
I At this point in the game, I think the only nation that would even have a chance at by the end of the entire thing to end up on that list, I think, would be the Timurids. They've got a lot of dev that they can eat up with Coruscant, with Mawar. I just don't see Portugal being able to surpass the 8 on that list, though. I just don't think any the people above them are going to get chopped up that much for them to be able to get up there.
So, speaking of chopping up, we'll jump right into one of the first wars. Great Britain flexing its colonial muscle, moved aggressively through Kilwa, secured the entire coastline, and then Deccan, as Bahmanis actually, through its war with Mamelukes, put itself in a position where it took land next to Great Britain. Great Britain seized on that and has now carved out a chunk of India. Any surprises there?
I'm impressed to finally see a Great Britain go through with an Indian invasion. We've had a lot of players say that they were going to do it or try to do it, and most of them didn't even bother declaring the war. But I mean, Panda's definitely got a great foothold there, and there's nothing really to stop them from gobbling up as much of India as they want. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and he did take 3 centers of trade in the Coromandel node, so this number will increase as trade continues to leak out of Coromandel. He's also starting to exert a little bit of influence on the Gulf of Aden. He doesn't currently have a merchant doing any action here. That's probably a limit because he doesn't have trade ideas yet, but expect with the next tech, I believe the idea group will open up, and he will be able to um, move quickly into trade and also offensive, dropping expansion most likely. But that'll be interesting to see. Do you expect to see Great Britain continue to expand in, we'll call it the Gulf of Aden and the Coromandel region, or do you think they may island hop towards Malacca?
I think they're probably going to go along the coastline, starting with the Coromandel node, and just work their way east and get a majority in all the nodes that they can, just since they can get one merchant for each trade company that has that majority power. And so I think they'll just work their way over a trade node at a time. And I think eventually they'll probably turn to Europe right at the very end, but I think for the foreseeable future, they're just going to try and consolidate as much of that trade as possible.
And that's a good segue. We'll pivot into Europe and touch base on a few of the wars that occurred there before spending most of our time on the current active war. Tuscany, France fought a relatively large war, number one in casualties as of right now. France ended up winning. Tuscany no longer with us, got carved up by Spain, Bavaria, and a little bit of Hungary now. But during that war, Ruthenia and Brandenburg and Bavaria used the opportunity to expand into Hanover. We'll focus on the Hanover War first. Any surprises there? Um, One thing I will note, it doesn't seem like they took a ton of land off of um, Hanover, losing 2 corps to Brandenburg and 1 state to Bavaria. Do you know what happened in that peace deal?
Yeah, this is something I knew about before session start, and that war was largely to help Mindboy reclaim the course he had lost in their initial 1v1, as well as just some positioning with Brandenburg. It wasn't meant to necessarily just be like a gutting war for Hanover by any means, but just kind of help out Mindboy a little bit there in Bavaria.
And Bavaria, good session for them. Expanded, got the Palatinate back, expanded into a little bit of Italy here. Any tension now between Bavaria and Hungary along this border?
Not really, no. I think especially with the looming certainty of a French versus Eastern power bloc war, whatever variety it may come in, I think kind of helps us not care as much about our border as much as worrying about how the West is going to shake out.
And as we see Spain reclaiming some of the land it lost in earlier wars in Naples, I expect them to continue to grow through southern Italy. The one interesting piece of land that seems to be up for grabs, uh, Tuscan Egypt and the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. Um, Quite a bit of grain here, still a decent amount of value from a trade perspective. Any tension brewing between the Spanish and the Hungarians, or has an agreement been made?
I haven't, as of yet, talked to Spain on the topic regarding either Italian borders or Egyptian borders. Um, but from everything I've heard and seen, I think Gabs is going to focus more on the Italian land just because the land itself is all so good, with it, most of it being 30 dev or so, that those provinces on their own, even before trade, are very, very good. So
Yeah, still tremendous amount of value here in Tuscany. The Piedmont state, for example, 7 ducats, 8 ducats, and this is all before trade. The Tuscan state, 12 ducats. The Venetian state, some devastation there, obviously being occupied, but Emilia Romano, a decent amount as well. Um, should be interesting to see. And as we zoom out a little bit, we'd be remiss not to touch on the New World. Uh, Portugal, currently making north of 500 ducats a month. I believe that puts them number 4 from an eco. Whoops, where's that? There we go. Yeah, number 4, and France's numbers inflated heavily because of expenses. So through a trade deal, so I believe they'd actually be number 3 in the world if not for that trade deal. When is Portugal going to start flexing its muscle and impacting politics outside of South America and Africa?
I think what it kind of comes down to, just knowing what I've seen so far from Dominic as a player, is I think Spain will have to make the decision to go into France at some point, at which point I think Portugal would act in order to get the Colombian colony. But I don't see them trying to pull some big power move against Great Britain or anything directly against any of the great powers of the world. And I think they're just going to kind of chill in South America and grab anything that's easy to grab, but not really put much in past that.
And then we touched on New Württemberg, a beast of a nation, uh, over 500,000 manpower, putting an additional 300,000 troops on the field, over 1,000 dev. Better Mexico still's got some ground to make up. Do you think that they can compete and support Spain to a significant degree in wars to come, or is it too little too late for Slurfin and Better Mexico?
I will say that Better Mexico looks a lot better after this week's session. Before this week, it was looking pretty pitiful, but this right here, I mean, it's gotten consolidated a lot more. You've got all the gold mines eaten up. I mean, it looks a lot better. The only issue is this new Ortonberg, if you look at it, it ranks around ninth or 10th in about every category worldwide, from income to armies, max manpower. It's a significant player now, and the only real reason why it's not more important is because of the fact that it's in the New World and far away. But Better Mexico just won't ever be able to contend with that, I don't believe. But it does pose an interesting match of Better Mexico and Portugal versus New Württemberg, and I think that right there would be interesting to see and a lot more balanced than you'd assume from a 2v1.
Oh, that would be an interesting matchup. And we'll pivot now, and I'll actually turn things over to you. A lot happened along this front. There was a war, maybe two wars involving the Timurids. Obviously, Qing is at war with Ruthenia. Qing started the war. I think it was inevitable that something was going to occur here. What happened with the Timurids this past session?
Um, I wasn't me and the Timurids, as I said last week, have a pretty good relations, and I mean, every time I piece out with the Mamluks, I ask, like where's the furthest I can take. But Curb did attack the Timurids. I'm not entirely sure what for, um, but I think his reasoning why was probably in preparation for a war against France, in order to kind of juggle truce timers, and so that way he wouldn't have to worry about the Timurids in the east. This motivated Qing, though, to declare on Ruthenia. And Qing has made it and it's Qing and Japan, and they've made it very clear that there's not a peace deal they are willing to take under any circumstances, because they are simply in this war to harass Ruthenia and cause problems as soon as France declares on Ruthenia. And the Timurids pieced out of their war pretty early with Ruthenia, and then they declared a war against me in order to fight Ruthenia again, of which I politely reminded them that we were on good terms and that I had no desire to fight them, and so we white pieced that war quite quickly. But
So, I heard a rumor actually about the Timurids' peace with Ruthenia. And so, Deccan and Timurids were allied. Deccan had just come out of the war with Great Britain when Ruthenia declared on Timurids, so Deccan declined the call to arms, realized their mistake by declining that, so attempted to use the enforce peace interaction with Ruthenia to get back into the war to support Timurids, but since Qing had declared, Ruthenia used that enforced peace to quickly get rid of Timurids. Is that true?
not exactly sure. I mean, I could see that being the case, but at the time all of this was going on, I was busy both negotiating with Mindboy, as well as actively invading the Mamluks and later Tuscany. And by the time I arrived at the Eastern Front with Qing, Timurids had already been pieced out.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly sure how that peace deal went down, but it was unusually quick. So I can
And
see that being the case.
now we'll actually drill in and take a look at the battle lines. A tremendous number of troops spread across an area with outrageously low supply limits. Uh, Terrain benefiting the defenders quite a bit in this area right now. What's going to happen in this war? You mentioned Qing and Japan have no intention of piecing out, but it doesn't seem like they can push hard into Ruthenia. Is Ruthenia going to attempt to end this war quickly through stab hit and then swing back to the Western Front, or are they going to attempt to fight a two-front war?
As of now, there's a lot of ways it could go. I know Ruthenia is trying to get Qing to come to some sort of peace agreement, but Qing is proving that they don't care about any peace deal, even if it's 100% peace deal, they don't want to accept it.
Really?
Um, Yeah, and so
But
it's
couldn't Ruthenia just unconditionally surrender then, if they're willing to give up 100?
well, there is the issue of the alliance with alliance and relations with both Hungary and Bavaria, and that if there was an uncon before the French War started, then Bavaria would just die instantly, um, which would obviously be problematic. But so far, me and
Oh, because
Kerr
you think
pushed.
Qing might break the alliance as part of the peace deal?
If you unconned, it would be possible, yes. So, um,
Oh.
but so far in the war, we pushed very quickly into Qing, and I kind of served as bait at multiple moments, going into really bad battles for me in order for us to win two other battles at the exact same time, which was kind of entertaining for me, just throwing 30,000 troops away because of the fact that I've got a high enough manpower recovery that it hasn't really been a big deal, and I actively increased it during the war. Um, but I mean, neither side can really win the war. There's no winning with this war, and neither me nor Curb ever wanted to fight this war because it's just useless. It's a waste of time for both sides, really. But
And one thing I will mention that is interesting, that's impacting both Qing and Ruthenia, war exhaustion. Um, Ticking up relatively high on the Ruthenian side, goods produced modifier minus 15%, but the Ruthenian bank and manpower reserves still quite healthy. Um, I gotta ask, what do you think Ruthenia is gonna do when Hanover and France come back for Hanover's land?
I will say that we have a lot of aces up our sleeve still. Neither me nor Ruthenia are actually having any strain from the Qing War, and I've
But
got a lot of
Ruthenia's
things we
army,
can still do.
it takes a while to travel.
It does. It does.
I'm,
I mean, seeing as you are France, I don't want to divulge too much, but know that we're making sure the French front is in consideration at the moment. So
why is Brandenburg still here?
because they wish to be there.
But they, okay, I guess I would have expected Brandenburg to come back to prepare for this war, along with
Mm,
Hungary, and allow Ruthenia to just hold this front.
yeah, I will say that that war in general is it. I mean, it's kind of frustrating because there's a way that me and Ruthenia could win the war. Um, Seeing as how the rules require 95% war score, and that Japan's in the war, there's no real way we could ever actually piece out the war.
Well, you can stab them at
Um,
50.
yeah, we could stab them at 50. It would take a lot of work, but
Yep.
certainly.
Okay, so we know next week Hanover, France, likely to go in on Bavaria or Brandenburg. Not sure which one makes sense to declare on. Haven't thought that one through. We've got a sleeping giant now down in Spain, though. Uh, Gabs has a extremely strong economy. His manpower skyrocketed this past session. His force limit is through the roof. I believe it's one of the highest in the game.
And not to mention, he's got the Portuguese economy to back it up.
Yep.
So
So between the two of them, it's yeah, well over 1,000 ducats a month. Uh, What's Spain gonna do?
I mean, it's kind of whatever Spain wants to do. I think there's a large possibility of seeing them fight for all of Italy and them kind of going for that, which would put them in conflict, obviously, with basically everyone. But considering they have Great Britain on their side, they could pretty easily crush France if they wanted to, crush Hanover, Bavaria. I mean, it's just, as long as they can get their troops there, they can probably win the war. So it's up to them, really. I expect them to go into Italy, though.
It's interesting. There was a lot of concern about the Tuscan, Hungarian, Ruthenian bloc, which I think was maybe a little overblown, but still worth paying attention to, considering how strong Hungary and Ruthenia have become. But Spain and Great Britain, considering the economic might of Portugal and the additional military boost of their colonial nations, is going to be a headache for anyone late game.
I will say that those three were always significantly more powerful than the Eastern Bloc, even with Tuscany. Especially from economic standpoint, Eastern nations just cannot ever reach the income that Great Britain and Spain can reach. So,
Is the economic difference impacting yourself and Ruthenia? Do you think that that is a deciding factor in where we are in the game right now? It doesn't
I
seem like
mean,
you're
in
hurting
ways,
for too many buildings.
yeah. Me and Ruthenia have definitely made sure to play our hands as well as possible, um, as far as that goes, to still be up with everyone else. I think it's more interesting in the fact that neither Gabs nor Panda really want to expand heavily in Europe at this point. And I think that's where you see that difference starting to come in more. It's just that they can put their money in random places rather than using it for survival.
Here's something interesting.
Hmm.
Switzerland, the newly
Hmm.
created March of
Hmm.
Bavaria, uh,
Yeah,
pulling 16 ducats out of Vienne,
yeah, yeah,
or into Vienne out of Pest.
yeah,
Was that
yeah.
an unintended consequence of the creation of Switzerland?
I think Mindboy tends to forget that these things happen when a subject is created. So,
Would divert trade stop that? No, it probably wouldn't. Huh.
yeah, it's interesting. I
So,
think I starting from the beginning of this game, I've been very careful diplomatically to put myself in what I think has been a pretty great position um, between my alliance with Jamie and Curb. I mean, I made sure I was in a good position, and so now that Jamie is gone, it's quite exciting in ways, just because obviously the status quo is destroyed and shattered, and now I think we're going to be in a constant war in Europe for a very long time now.
and it looks like Great Britain, for the moment, is choosing to focus outside of Europe. So obviously, um, we'll probably see another war in India come the session. Let's see what that truce timer is. About 5 years into the session, we're going to see a French war, French Hanover War of some sort against Bavaria, Brandenburg. Not sure how those declarations will take place yet. What player war aren't we accounting for? What's the one to watch for?
I think the biggest thing to watch for is what Spain wants to do, because I think Great Britain is probably going to take their time going through India and probably try and loop back and fight whoever is the victor between the France and Ruthenian power blocks. But I think Spain is in a unique position where they can really kind of go pick on someone if they feel like it right now. And there's a lot of good targets for them to go pick on at the moment, whether it just be, easy wars into some of the AI they still border, or going for a little bit of a bigger fish.
Yeah, I think that's yeah. Spain's definitely the one to watch moving forward. I think they're in a pretty unique situation now that Tuscany's gone. Opens up some easy and extremely valuable expansion for them, but at the same time, if they're going to mix it up, uh, now's the time to start doing so.
And also, I could very easily see a player war between Deccan and the Timurids. Now that Deccan's going to start being weakened by Great Britain, I think I could definitely see Dutch going in and kind of being opportunistic there to try and seize some of that Indian land.
Do you know if they have an agreement around how to carve up Mewar? I noticed it doesn't appear as though Deccan moved in any further from where they were going into the session.
I haven't heard of an agreement, and especially, but they might have one. But also, at the very least, with the alliance broken now, that could be I mean, it could be the end of any agreement that they did have. So,
Well, Martian, appreciate the time, and I guess I'll see you on the battlefield on Saturday.